Okay, so opening the panel. And first, I have to unfortunately say that our fifth guest, Rana Bütikofer, had to cancel. Unfortunately, it's a bit of a pity, but we cannot do anything. And despite, I'm even more happy that Jochen Steinhilber and Gregor Darmer are with us. We will change the sequence now. We will have 2 5-minute impulses by Jochen Steinhilber and Gregor Darmer, and then I will ask María, Fernada, Espinosa, and Carlos Lopes to react on that. First, I welcome Jochen Steinhilber. He's Director General at the Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development and Germany, responsible for multilateral politics and human rights. And also he was a colleague before as part of the Ebert Foundation, and he will present on how the BMZ is analyzing the current challenges, what answer is putting forward, and I have informed him a bit about what we have heard in the morning, as he couldn't be with us at that time. And Gregor Darmer is CEO of Global Perspectives Initiative, which just had a very impressive report last week. The world is changing, and Germany and the Global South. And in his keynote, he will give us the central messages of this report, which square in what we have been hearing in the morning. Jochen, yes, welcome. Thank you, Imme Scholz. Thank you for the invitation. I'm happy to be with you here, and I regret that I couldn't be with you during the keynotes this morning. I hope we can still get into the discussion quickly. I will keep it short and sweet. I just wanted to describe what is the situation that we are looking at, what's the international politics, but also development cooperation. We have quite a veritable landscape of crises, which we have to work together with, lots of acute crises, but also, from my point of view, 2 big erosion crises, which is the question of global warming and global injustice. We have a dominance of geopolitical questions that we, as development politicians, have to look at. We have a renaissance of war as a political means, and I also see that we have a crisis of trust. If you look at from the traditional perspective from the countries of the Global South and the industrialized North. Many of you say, and I would underpin this, we're in a transformation process towards a multipolar world order, and we could talk a lot about that. I'll briefly mention 2 points only. And the old global order, which we have carried up to here, many countries didn't have a space in that. It's important, also countries that we may be speaking about today, and multipolarity, as far as I experience, and I think that's the experience of many of other multipolarity for our partner countries, that is reality, has been for a long time. It's options. They look at options with respect to energy, food supply, and so on. So I think we have to get stronger as the German government as well. We get clear on that these countries have interests. We don't have to share them necessarily, but we have to know them. And here I would say, with a look at the order that we envisage, we had a little of a shock moment. For many, it was on the vote in the General Assembly on the Russian attack war, which made clear that not everybody shares our worldview, but it was also not really about Russian or Chinese orders to be supported, but having options and balancing the options and assessing the options. And I think it's important if we start, and I think that was topic today in the morning, how can we reform reform institutions? How can we develop the UN system? We cannot underestimate the order propositions of the global south. And this is something that we have to get at one table with everyone. Germany, brief for development is something that is under pressure. You have heard about cycle lanes in Peru. We have to look at the caricature of this, and at the same time, it is very necessary to get into some reforms in that. The third point, looking at the general situation, the abrupt stop of USAID. This is something that troubles us a lot at the moment, and the consequences cannot be overestimated. It's a massive crisis in the development cooperation. I think we have fleeing, we have migrations, the big UN agencies, up to 40% funded by the US. Second area, which is overlooked, USAID. I'm not agreeing with everything that they did. They were very active in promoting civil society. Lots of breakdown here in the global south. And the third point overlooked is data. We have problems already now to get reliable data concerning hunger and other things as well. Lots of facilities of the U.S. Americans are used there. So financial things are one thing. We're going to see the effects of that more strongly in 1-2 months than we are seeing them now. And the other thing is the ideological work in the UN agencies that we do have concerning inclusion, women, climate, where we actually look at getting up the language, keeping the language that we have agreed on in the last years. UNICEF, for example, there was a first vote, 35-1. We can say, okay, there is some solidarity to be seen here. What has to happen? I think very generally speaking, in the times of mistrust, we really have to concentrate on building trust. Trust is the basis of political activities, and I think development policy can contribute a lot here. Long-term partnership relationships, I think. Also for Germany and for the interplay, we have to balance off and account for the orientation to what does development policy give us without just simply following our interests. But if we want to have a grip on international politics, we are dependent on capacities that we can build alliances that are reliable, that we can build networks, and they have to extend the OECD space. And this was started in the last term of office that has to involve the countries of the Global South. At the same time, we have to say that from my point of view, it is a crisis of trust, which is visible in different fields of politics. One is pandemics. We had migration, where we have a clear view on many countries of the Global South on how we deal with that, but also politics in the Near and Middle East. So this is up. We need a positive impulse here, but we really have to cover that crisis of trust. And three more points I want to mention. One is discourse, which I have mentioned already. We have to counteract the caricature of development politics in Germany, but development cooperation has to change at the same time. Maybe we'll hear more about that from the view of the Commission. So I'll leave it in the discussion. I think from my point of view, is that this politics is suffering for decades from overload. We have to focus, I think, And this is because I think we have to make our goals more clear, our objectives more clear, to see what countries can we pursue these goals, where are matches, where will it not work, what are the UN agencies to be involved here. The second point from my point of view, I do think that development politics work a long time on this, and many will have said this is a platitude. We've heard this from the antique ideologies. We need more structured policies. We need a Europeanization of global development. This is the only way. If we all have to boil down the funds, we'll have to look at on how to bundle our powers. That's the one thing. And the second thing is that we want to have trust in rural relationships with the countries of the Global South. It'll work best in the context of functional international organization. This is why we have to have the focus on that, even though if we look at it today, thinking it all doesn't work and it's all breaking up and decaying, we have to find the optimism to shape things and change the international system. I think this is crucial, because otherwise I think in the next years we will not get anywhere in development policies in the next years. And the last point, from my point of view, we have to make more clear what is in it for Germany without really getting into crude policies of interest of our own. We have to make sure how can we support raw material support, hydrogen, how can we do partnerships, but it has to be on a mutual benefit. And for this, the values and ideas of our partners have to be known. At the same point is that we have to make sure, maybe that's a bit old-fashioned as well, that we don't go into the trap of short-term interests. What we see at the moment, and that is quite obvious really, in development cooperation, we feel at home in crises. Our thinking is coined by crises because we are working in crises all the time. We have a high density of crises, but at the same time, it's clear that if we are not able to go beyond these in our thinking, look at the transformational element in it, we will experience societies that can up the prices, that can handle crises, but we do see that they become exhausted. The intervals between the crises are getting shorter and shorter, so a development policy has to do things. Look at the hardships of people now, trying to change that, but at the same time, look at the horizon, look at the big picture. What's the contribution we can make to that contribution, to that transformation? And we have to have a working international system for that. Last point, I said this a couple of times, I know, but this is really the last point. I always think it is an asset, and coming back to the discussion, getting development policy in, or do we walk around the world and share money? I think we have to make sure that German international policies, security policies have a big asset, and one of these is the multitude of instruments. We have to get better in some things, making them coherent in their actions. So political foundations, civil society, it is very important that we just not look on the strong cooperation level, but we also have to talk about social politics, because it's about picking up on countries, creating links beyond governments, from the point of view of getting to know the upcoming elites, and get the multitude of differences in the societies and capture these, get into these. This is something that we as German international and development politicians have to underscore, that we have good instruments at our hand. We just have to make use of these and look at this for the future. Thank you so far. I'm looking forward to the discussion we're going to have in a couple of minutes.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you. I'll directly pass on to Gregor. Darmer. Thank you. also on my behalf. I'm happy to present our report here, which we just published last week, the Commission's report, Germany and transformation in the Global South. Before I look at this on the Commission, a few words on why we started it and who's behind it. This morning, we've heard it already. We see a world in change, in the course of which countries of the Global South, I'll use the term, although it's not the best of all terms, getting more important while the West is getting defensive in its order, split up, limited in action. And the second office of President Trump, we do see how the U.S., this has been said again, is retracting from many international associations. And that means increasing expectations of Germany as the third biggest economy worldwide to take up leadership as the giving money. And the question is, how is Germany going to handle this growing expectation? And what is the answer of this new geopolitical situation in which we do see the shifts? How should Germany align its international cooperation, especially with a look at the Global South? This was the starting question a year ago, and we addressed a number of experts a year ago, asking them to enter a structured process in getting the answers. And we could get the former defense minister, Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, with the former Joschka Fischer, the former international minister. We had Mr. Friedenhofer from the Institute of Peace Research. We have Janina Kugel, and from Justice we had Christina Langfeld, representatives of the civil society, so interdisciplinary group, which took a year to look at this question. And in that, the process of the work was that we listened a lot. And we interviewed experts, representatives from the Global South, mainly to listen, to hear what are the expectations towards Germany's, what are the changes here, and what are the expectations with the changes. And we had 6 areas of topic to deliver recommendations which should or seem to be relevant for the Commission, which is geopolitics, development, labor migration, international finances, economics, and trade and climate policies and funding. And with respect to the time, I would just like to hit on some focus areas, geopolitics, and Maria, you said it, labor migration, but I can come up with more points on the other areas later on. Let me start with the geopolitics. Here, the opinion of the Commission was, and we've said this, developing towards a multipolar world. That is very important, that Europe in this more and more multipolar world acts as a uniform pole, and Germany should do everything in its power to get the defense and international politics of Europe strengthened. And multilateralism is something that we've heard a lot here. There was big consensus in the Commission that for the continuation of multilateralism, this needs to be reformed, and Germany should take a leading role here in that, so that the multilateral organizations can reflect the realities of the 21st century. This is a long-term process, taking time. This is why they recommend the Commission thinks to act in an alliance of the willing, the Europe of the two speeds is a key word here, and this also includes the recommendation that our partnerships models should be reflected critically, restructured possibly, because science and politics said that Germany has 119 partnerships with 80 countries, and this is where the Commission says we need to sort them, we need to prioritize them, look at the intensity of relations we want to have with which countries, where can we use the instruments of international relationships for government consultations, and where do we concentrate on certain topics, be it energy partnerships, raw materials, all getting into a different priority here. And this segues us to the development policy, because this is where the Commission made very clearly, also in its immediate reports already, which we published in January already, that this is a main pillar of international engagement, also an effective instrument of soft power, and should have an independent ministry. And this is why we were happy that first recommendations were reflected in the coalition contract of the new federal government. Still, we've heard from Mr. Steinhilber that development policies is still under pressure, and we have to maintain the funding, drive it forward, and that still we have a strategic realignment away from the old models of the giver-taker roles, but towards interest-based approaches. And that was a clear feedback from the expert interviews we've had, telling us what are your interests, what are our interests. On the basis of these, we should design new concepts for cooperation that are attractive, and that is what we should align ourselves with, looking to the future, interest-based, where are concepts in trade, investments, infrastructure, raw materials, or climate. One crucial topic, that's what we're looking at today. Where can we find new partnerships today? You've said it in your introduction. Eye level is a keyword here. How can we fill it with life, and how can we do concrete offers? And the Commission work made clear that labor migration sees very big potential. So 2 words on this here. Migration, of course, is a big topic. We have focused on labor migration. Otherwise, we could have had a different, an independent commission for that. If we look at regular migration as well, and refugees, but we focus on labor migration, and that was said also in the morning. We have a demographic development which is calling for a triple win situation, really. We see an aging population, you said, Carlos, in Germany, and at the same time a dynamic growth of population on the African continent. So how can we sketch out and shape this situation so that the people, I think it's 12 million, getting into the labor market in Africa with 3 million jobs. In Germany, we are aging 1.4 million jobs vacant. How can we match that so that we have positive effects for both involved countries and for the individual person as well? And all the expert interviews made clear that Germany is not the #1 country where labor wants to go. We have to look at racism topics and really look at service in the administration. So in this context, the Commission recommends a national migration culture and center where all that process can be accelerated and funneled, and also a talent fund should be set up which can really motivate highly qualified labor to come into the country. With respect to the time, I would leave it at that for the time being. But beyond that, the Commission, and that's important to make clear at the end, it said that we need more international commitment and not less, because in times of change, international policies decide on domestic wealth and well-being instead of nationalism. We have to maintain our interests with strong alliances, and despite of playing values up against interests, it is crucial to name both clearly, and it's better said with the populistic defamation and the national discourse. Don't duck away from that, but use international engagement strategically to get into this and present that it is in your own interest. And the final word, central point of the Commission also was we need more coherence. We've heard this. The Commission and the expert interviews said this. We interviewed Carlos Lopes as well. We heard again, Germany does a lot, but we can't really say what. There's lots of actors, representatives abroad. We have Goethe institutes, chambers, but the overall concept is not clear. And so this is why the Commission pleads to get to more coherence by working in clusters. It proposes a cluster database to which parliamentarians, administration and government can access. A central point for this would, of course, be a common goal, a common objective, and for this, the Commission welcome very much that in the coalition contract, the creation of a National Security Advisory Board is seen as a central instrument to drive this cluster idea forward and create more coherence, because by that international advisory board, we find a place where political analyses and planning can be joined up. That was good to see that the tracks are laid out for this now, and this is also a key word on a very high level. We've heard it today already as well, that it is a historical time where the tracks are laid out for the future, and it depends on the mindset strongly. And here the Commission members plead to all people taking responsibility in politics. One thing is the action, the other is really take a stand and let the words be followed by action. Thank you for these two input contributions.
María, Fernanda, you are the first one to.
Not again. Carlos first.
Carlos
this time.
First? Okay. Okay.
Yes. Let's switch the order. Sorry to the moderator.
So, no, that's fine. We had
been a rebel here,
before.
but no. Let's keep.
Okay. Good. The question to both of you, right, is whether the inputs we got now are up to what's needed. And you both have described what you think is needed. But of course, having also a representative from government, you know how it is in government. You cannot always, you do not have all instruments and resources at hand, which you would like to have in an ideal world. So, Carlos, what is your take on what you have heard?
Thank you. María Fernández played the trick on me. Well, the issue is whether what we heard is institutional Botox or is it more profound? That's the key question. Because if we really want to go profound, then maybe we need to retain a certain number of mistakes that were made in the past that have to be assumed. And, you know, I was listening carefully and I took a note of 4 points that I think are critical for us to learn from the past. The first point is about the trust, which was mentioned by Jochen. It's very clear that everybody agrees now there is mistrust in the multilateral system. Now, where is this mistrust coming from? It's coming from unfulfilled promises. But in fact, these unfulfilled promises are linked to overambitious targets that were not possible to meet in the first place. So why were they agreed with? Because, if you say, with all, due respect to the incredible effort that was associated with the Sustainable Development Goals, if you say that you are going to eliminate poverty by 2030, and you were in 2015, so in 15 years, what humanity has not been capable of doing in centuries, was that a realistic target? Obviously, it was a very ambitious one. And therefore, for each one of these, you have under-delivery, and that creates mistrust. Like the Africans would go for these climate finance negotiations, and they think their bottom line is to ask for more money, even bigger targets. And after lengthy negotiations, eventually around language, we agreed on something that is wishy-washy, but has the number that, was requested. Like in Baku, 1 trillion, the road to 1 trillion. Everybody knows this is completely unrealistic. It's not going to happen. But we can go even deeper. Is the 1.5 degrees really realistic within the target frame that was proposed? We know that we are already on overshoot. So we have created this mistrust by being overambitious on each one of these targets that, are not the responsibility of one or the other. In this case, definitely not the responsibility of Germany. But because of it, we are now in this conundrum of mistrust. So if we learn from that mistake, what is it that we can do different in the future? That is the key question. And I think what we can do is 3 things. One is to deal with the current situation as we dealt with the pandemic. In the pandemic, we needed to vaccinate everybody, right? So we knew that this had to be done in a very short period of time. So it was a short-term intention and plan. But we knew that after everybody has been vaccinated, we needed to move on. We're not going to continue with vaccination for the rest of our lives. That was a priority that was urgent. It needed to be addressed. But once addressed, we needed to build the new. And the new was what? The new was, to prevent new pandemics, to make sure that we had a much tighter health system at the national level, if possible at the global level, and so on and so forth. So we need to do something similar with the current crisis of ODA and the ODA centrality. We need something that is short-term, that is going to arrest people dying. It's going to address humanitarian collapse that Jochen was mentioning. So we need to address those things. It's very urgent. It's very urgent. But we need to move on to a new system. So we need to sort of do the same as we did with the pandemic. I'm not going to say what the new system is. It's a build-up with many actors involved. The second one is that we need to move out of the log frame mentality. You see, when we have a problem, we do a log frame. So we have objectives, key indicators, and then you have, targeted interventions. So this is how the projects work, and this is how we have organized our minds. This is how we have organized our structures. This is how we have organized the distribution of our resources. The problem with that is that development is organic. It's different from one place to another. So then you have a tension between supply and demand-driven, which is what your report addressed. So the supply will say, well, we have to do things in a certain order, with a certain structure. The problem is that that structure, once we have refined it with hundreds of discussions of experts, we think is perfect. Then we go to Equatorial Guinea, and we want to do the same as in Vietnam, and we want to do the same in Bolivia as we do in Costa Rica, and it doesn't work because it's organic. Contexts are different and so on. So how do we instill a bit more space so it's less supply-driven and it's more demand-driven? So that's, for me, is the second. And then the third, and this is not for countries like Germany, which are donors, but more for the recipients, they need to get out of the compensation mentality. Because development does not work on the basis of compensation. So you have a problem. We know the historical reasons and all that. I'm just skipping the obvious. You have a problem. You have a development challenge. You have a performance problem. You are not going to solve it with someone compensating for that. What is the alternative? The alternative is that instead of compensation, you need to look for the systemic reasons that need change. And the systemic reasons are there. I was just talking with my colleague from the South African embassy here during the break, and he was asking me exactly that question. I said, I will just give you an example. After the 2008-2009 crisis, we had a major problem with the integrity of the banking system. So the Bank of International Settlements, which is like the central bank of the central banks, establishes the prudential rules and how the central banks should act, issued new directives. They are called Basel III directives. So I don't expect you to know about the intricacies of banking system, but needless to say, they requested much more stronger due diligence. And amongst others, stress testing of banks and all the rest. The intention was good, obviously. It was to avoid another crisis like 2008, 2009. The unintended consequences is that by requesting incredible amount of due diligence that banks cannot really fulfill in frontier markets, particularly in Africa, the banks deserted Africa. That was not the intention. That is a systemic issue because the access to capital became even more difficult, not less. So you have a crisis that is provoked by a shock in the subprime in the US. You have nothing to do with us. We didn't provoke the crisis, but you suffer the most out of it because of what has been introduced. And we can go on with examples of this type. So that's the kind of issues that ODA in the future has to address. Systemic impacts rather than compensation. And this needs a change of mindset, both in the donors, but more importantly in the recipients. So they stop going to these COP meetings and asking for more money. And my last one is about the issue of migration, which I think, if you look into the global report, is quite well covered there as well. Well, in the future, we are going to have two situations that we are not really prepared for. The first one is digital migration. So a lot of things will be done in terms of labor in a different jurisdiction from where the services are being sold. Right, it's already happening, but right now at a small scale in relation to the future. So it's not call centers that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the ability empowered by AI for the Bangladeshi to be processing the pension funds administration of Norway, delivered real time in Norwegian, but being done in Bengali. This is around the corner. And we are not prepared for it. Because up to now, you look into the GDP composition of the wealthy countries, and what they have done is that they have exported most of the industrial production, a bit less in Germany, elsewhere, but the services are the one that have catapulted the economy. But the services are going to be threatened by AI, digital migration, big scale. So that's one. And the second is that if you don't have the labor to produce certain types of services, and I would add for María Fernada's happiness, care, the two are going to require that we engage on migration in a completely different way, true, but a lot of it could be done not by necessarily people coming to live in the wealthy countries, but rather the jobs going into their countries. Case in point, care. You know, a lot of the national health system of the UK is in crisis. And they have already started to ask for countries like South Africa to basically take a certain number of surgeries and different types of interventions there, paid by the NHS, because can't do it, but the labor is there. So you'll get a lot of this. And I don't think it is reflected enough. It is mentioned in the report indirectly, but I think we need sort of a boost on it. So those are the points that I wanted to share.
Thank you. Thank you, Carlos. Another layer of what migration means in times of digital and artificial intelligence. So now it's your turn, María. I'm very happy. You will take over. You had spoken about re-signifying specific terms. So yes. Maybe I'm wondering whether you were happy how the German colleagues defined and used terms.
Yes, I mean, I've taken profuse notes, you know, not only of the two German representatives, but also of very interesting comments from Carlos here, and perhaps three reactions. Number one, okay, so the title is The Role of Germany. And I was debating whether to be prescriptive and say 1, 2, 3, in moving to the ideal situation. How would we like to see Germany in the global landscape? And I think I'm going to do a little bit of that, especially listening to the outcomes of the report and to what we heard from the representative of the Ministry of Economic Cooperation. And I would say how we would like to see Germany in the global landscape. Number one, I think that Germany has a very important role to play within the European Union first. We understand that it's a very fragmented, difficult environment right now. And all the gains that we saw in the past in the European Union are facing difficulties, starting with the Green New Deal, for example. I heard with great attention in Munich the speech, not of Vice President Vance, everybody heard that, but I think of President Ursula von der Leyen. And I said, okay, you know, three priorities for Europe. Number one, competitiveness and clean development. Number two, migration. And number three, security. Which, you know, I was there and I said, okay, where is the rest of the world? Where is the global majority countries? The issue of migration, and here I would like to respond to what I heard, you know, migration is not only about humans and labor force. You know, where are the people what is that we need, and how we transfer labor force and, you know, new technologies, and if the labor force is going to stay here or go there. More and more, you know, being both, Ecuador is a country of origin, but also of destination of migration. And what we see is that it is not about filling the gaps of labor. It is about an issue of rights, and it is about that in most cases, migration is forced. It's forced by conflict, it's forced by climate, it's forced by war. And so there is this component of the human security aspect of migration, which is freedom from fear and freedom from one part of it. And I think that we need to work more on that. And here perhaps an anecdote. I wish this was like more Chatham House, but I'm going to disclose that. I was the president of the General Assembly when we adopted the Global Pact on Migration. And the country that united the European position and helped adopt the pact with all sorts of procedural gymnastics, I have to say, was Germany at the time. And I'm very thankful to former Chancellor Merkel for that. She really, played the cards hard to adopt the pact. And so, in the ideal world, we would like to see, and because Germany has an experience on that, to play strong cards on migration from the preventive side, from the human security side, but also on the demographic side and on the labor side, but in a more holistic perspective. I know this is a very touchy issue, looking within, the European Union, but that's one of the things. And in really bringing back I would say the European Union as an honest broker and as a predictable partner for countries of the global majority. And here, Germany is one of the most important countries in the Union, and is trustworthy and has created, a legitimacy in the developing world. And I think that this is much needed, because often we feel disconcerted by what we see, and we start wondering what is there is no Green Deal anymore. Now it's clean development, what it means, the impacts of the CBAM and what it implies. So I think that there is more dialogue needed. I'm also on the side when I hear deeds and not words. I would say we need the words, we need the proper narratives in order to act, and to act wisely. And this is, I think, important. The number two is on the issue of ODA. First of all, I would say overseas development assistance. It's very old. It's really an old category. And I was very pleased to hear that ODA should be replaced by ODC, overseas development cooperation. It's easy, it's very easy, but it implies many things. It's the partnership, the equal and horizontal partnerships that we were discussing. It is the conversations that we are having with the Spanish government on circular cooperation, for example. Spain is developing this new feminist cooperation framework, which is also very interesting. And Germany also being a country that has a feminist foreign policy that started with the previous administration as well. So I think that that's important to redefine cooperation. We know that ODA is not going to solve the development deficit in our part of the world. But it is a political deal. It is not an issue very much of amounts of money, but there is a proof of love in a way, to say yes, we commit, yes, we feel co-responsible, and we are at the table when the discussions on the financing for development outcome document is taking place. The voice of Germany counts. The experience of Germany in development cooperation under, with the transformations that Carlos was talking about. I think it's important. So ODA at the end is a win-win political operation of trust. It's political dialogue with the recipient countries. And I also agree that there is a change of mentality of both, the recipients and the providers. And, the examples I have seen of successful cooperation partnerships is when there is strong national ownership and when there is proper translation and demand driven. These things that we all know, but they don't happen, often. The other aspect here, I think, is the issue that we saw with the Alliance for Multilateralism that Germany was leading at the time. And I think it's perhaps more important than ever. It was a space that started small with Germany and France at the time. And I recall vividly, because I was, again, the president of the General Assembly. This was during the first Trump administration. But I think, and then it started growing. And I don't know how many countries were part of this alliance at the time. And it was extremely, extremely constructive. And to have this coalition of the willing also in defense of multilateralism, in defense of multilateral institutions, in defense of collective imagination and collective action at the end of the day. And I think this is something that, you know, could be interesting. In terms of you know, what is in there for Germany, looking at migration, support for multilateralism, and other proofs of love. In proofs of love, I use this because when Spain was preparing for the summit with European Union, CELAC, yeah, again, the camera. Well, but we were having this consultation, closed meetings, and someone said, a high representative of the European Union said, but you know what? Why Latin America is not supporting the resolutions on Ukraine at the UN? And I said, well, because there is a trust deficit, and because there are proofs of love that are needed, you know, not only for Latin America, but, you know, for the global majority countries. And said, you know, proofs of love like what? I said, you know, issues like supporting at the time, you know, the loss and damage fund on climate. It is not about writing the check. It is about supporting the concept. You know, how is that a country in the Caribbean, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, after a hurricane, a climate shock, they lose 180% of their GDP, you know, in 48 hours. And how is that they can handle that if there is no a safety net for them to respond, for example? You know, these are the issues. On issues of that restructuring, we know that countries are unable you know, to invest on the fundamentals, on the essentials in their societies, because they're putting more money into servicing debt. And there are ways and there are alternatives. The RJR has produced a set of real options for debt relief. You know, supporting debt relief efforts and leading. Germany has started doing that. In a way, there are two experts here. There is Sarah and Jörg that have been, you know, behind this. The issue, again, connected to the Alliance on Multilateralism, we saw the role of Germany in leading the negotiations of the Pact of the Future. And this is already telling. I saw it happen, you know, firsthand, and how, together with Namibia, Germany was able to build a consensus around the future of the UN, and not a Botox reform. I love that, Carlos, by the way, but you know, a profound structural systemic reform. And you know, on top of everything, you are going to have the next president of the UN General Assembly, which I think it's good news, because in 80 years, we were only 4 women to preside over the General Assembly. The 4 from the global majority countries, by the way, you know, India, Liberia, Bahrain, and Ecuador. And for the first time ever in 80 years, a woman from industrialized countries, from the Western countries, which is also very telling in terms, in positive terms, and we see that as a great opportunity, because the landscape within the UN is rather bleak. And there is a lot of movement and oxygen and trust building that needs to take place in the next year. As I said before, for me, it's a make it or break it moment. We will face soon a change of administration in the UN, and I think it's time to really think take responsibly the future of the epicenter of multilateralism, which is the UN. So I see the role of Germany. To be very frank, I haven't read the report, but now I'm ready to do it because I see a lot of good things there and inspiring, and we need that. We need reasons for hope, reasons that would boost collective imagination. And in this moment of volatility, but also of transition, of building new, I think it's needed. And I have followed the architecture of the new government and the government agreement right now, and it sends interesting signs that would be able to rebuild trust and place. Germany has always been a little shy in the international scene, but has done great things. So I think that it is time, to raise the voice and to operate in a dangerous, volatile, complicated environment, but I think Germany is well equipped to do that.
Thank you, María Fernanda. Also for the trust in Germany to produce predictability and honesty in negotiations in a time of fluidity, as you said, where this is really hard to achieve. Jetzt ist der Moment, wo die Fragen und Beiträge aus dem Publikum auch möglich sind.
So it's about time for questions from the audience. I want to give more opportunity to everyone to think. Also women. The men are always first to raise their hands. Maybe you could help me out to keep the overview. A woman there, very good.
Okay. Ihr müsstet jetzt mal auf.
You should stand up and this person at the back called out first, and I'd like to ask. I ask the others to raise their hands when I ask them to, please. Okay, so keep it brief if you can. My name is Gabriel, International Director of the organization jeopardising with the sub-organization RAS, Automatic Regenerative Systems. My organization develops medical technologies that makes the cell communication of human beings controllable. This technology should be freely accessible to the global population as soon as we can do this in international cooperation successfully. For this, we need three key conditions. One thing is public awareness, global cooperation, and the third is funding. I'd like to add two optional ones, and then I'll be with it. Optionally would be the setting up of a United Nations transmit format, which gives up a 5-minute status report every day on government TV, and also unrestricted access to the Darmer program and the scientific database. Would be good to do research first and then development and then do the research properly. Everyone who can help in this, mainly with public awareness and fundings, I'm happy to talk to them. And during the course of the day, I'll probably approach a couple of people. Be prepared. Thank you. Well, that was advertising for something, but it's good that everybody knows about it and can answer the requests. The lady first, please. Thank you. Marie-Louise Absagen, Forum Umwelt und Entwicklung. We are an NGO network. Thank you for the great thoughts. María, Fernada, thank you very much for finding a new word, global majority, a very thrilling term, and thank you for being the only one saying that development cooperation should be a human right. For example, in migration, the concentration, as we see it under the new government, together with security policy, detaches us from what everybody wanted, what we wanted for everyone to live with dignity in a healthy world with a good future for their children. And that should be the central question of Germany's role in this, that everybody, every human being, nevertheless, where they work, have the same right. And this seems to be not the case anymore, not the objective. And Mr. Lopes, I think it's an interesting thought that everything in international has to be done in international cooperation and is overambitious, but then we should depart from human rights because they're very extreme, ambitious goals, like the same representation of men and women. We've just heard about 4 women in the General Assembly, so I think we need ambitious goals in international corporations. There's been goals that has been there at the IC. Agreement for the sea, for the oceans, but the things that have to be the guiding principle, I would be happy if you could discuss the guiding principle for the future. Germany sees a very horrible narrative coming up, deviating from the human rights.
I'm a
student here at Heinrich-Böll-Stiftung. I have a question concerning rethinking multilateralism, in particular on how global cooperation could be redefined. For example, if we just want to look at aid projects that are being offered, what would spring to my mind is an industrialization of different countries that bring their resources to the West now. From my time in Peru, I saw a lot on how many resources go out without them being processed in the country itself. As I was working in an environment NGO, I learned about the risks as well if that industrialization happens, especially in the countries where the Amazonas River is found or other big parts of the wood. How are we going to make sure that this point, environmentalism, global sustainability, is not brought to the background while at the same time we focus on full cooperation? How are we going to find the balance, especially between human rights, finances, global sustainability, and all the other points? Thank you. I'll take a third question. The raised hand here.
Thank you so much for what you've shared. I wanted to ask a question, mainly about, of course, the issue on Africa. In some African countries, let me give an example. I come from Uganda. We have a kind of way that also some systems are built in a way that a lot of resources are centralized. For example, in the big cities, leaving majority of the people, like the majority of the communities, not receiving the right support that they have to receive. So for me, I think I would like to ask this first question. How do you think that changing how, for example, partnerships are channeled Do you think this can also, for example, because the structure is in a way that it's a top to bottom approach, so the resources or the kind of development projects or anything always has to start from a higher level, and then by the time it reaches the communities that really need it, it is really insufficient. There are some regions that also have, there are some regions that actually have so many NGOs. There's a region in Karamoja. It has so many NGOs, World Vision, GIZ, blah, 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 and all these NGOs are there. But this is a region that is very poor, and this is a region that is also facing hunger, it's facing different crises, but then they have most of the NGOs. So what also I would like to ask is, how are these NGOs, for example, that are there impacting? Because we have also NGOs where a lot of funding goes to administrative costs rather than delivering to the communities. Then another question that I would maybe pose is, do you think that also changing kind of also like where young people should be included in, for example, these decision-making processes, because Africa has one of the, like it's, I think, the biggest, youngest population in the whole world, but most of them are unemployed. So how do you think that bringing them also in these spaces can also help them redefine their future? And then do you also think that the labor, for example, labor shortages, when we have people coming from Africa or other countries coming here, how won't this be a brain drain, but rather, how won't this be a brain drain where, of course, labor is extracted and then the countries are left without skilled labor? Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And the last.
Yeah.
And then you can prepare your answers.
Thank you very much. I'm Joelle. I'm also a student or a scholarship recipient of the Heinrich-Böll-Stiftung. And I would like to ask, also building upon your aspect of human rights and upon your comments on aid. And I was thinking a lot about conditionality, right? Because in my opinion, human rights and the protection of, Black communities, of queer communities, is extremely important, and there can't really be a compromise, right? But when we're looking at aid and at support, we're also seeing resistance, and that, in my opinion, also very reasonably from countries of the global majority saying, we refuse an imposition of certain, conditions to support, of certain, values, which again, also rooted in colonialism, and which I also understand a lot, that there must be more cooperation and mutual exchange. So my question based upon that is, how do you envision the concept of aid, and how do you see the future of mutual development that is built on sovereignty and respect, whilst also ensuring that according to the UN, no one is left behind? So I would like to hear some insights upon that. And also I wanted to say, super interesting talks that all of you had, and yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, so we have one question about whether to qualify development objectives as over-ambitious or as rights-based, how to deal with that tension or dilemma. Then we have how to plan or promote industrialization without environmental destruction. Then we have many questions, 4 questions actually we had about centralization of development efforts versus local development, how to include youth in decision making and how to avoid brain drain being an outcome of migration. And finally, how to deal with the imposition of values or promoting human rights. This tension also. I would like to and then we had also how does the German aid. I think these are two questions, different questions if asked to representatives from the BMZ, I think, and to others. So I start with you, Gregor, and then we do the round until María, Fernanda, and then we go to lunch.
Okay. Ich versuche mich mal auf die Fragen zu beziehen.
Okay, I'll try to address the questions that I can answer to. Others will be better to answer some questions better than I will. Talking on the brain drain effect with respect to labor migration, that is something that we addressed in the Commission. We had a very interesting discussion with Fred Swaniger from the African Leadership Academy, who clearly said it is about scalability. If we have enough training, this brain draining issue is a phantom debate. Mainly, it needs a proper strategic analysis of the demand, and this is why the Commission pleads for, based on the analysis it did together with the German economics, to develop concepts that prevent the topic of brain drain as a total. Involving youth, very important, and I think that should be central. Future of aid. We heard about this in the morning. It is about maybe looking away from the fixation to compensation and think things more broad. That was our attempt in the coordination. We didn't do a report on the future of development politics, but it's different aspects that play in: work migration, international funding, finances, and so on. I think we have to broaden the topic a bit to subsumize the topics as part of them. And migration, climate should be addressed here as well. And I wouldn't so much look at it from the aid aspect. One thought as well, which came up when I listened to what you said, Carlos. Maybe I'd like to take the opportunity. You said we need to build a new system. Yes, I do see this, I do hear this, but in our commission we had very experienced former ministers, members of the government, and against their experience, they warned against on how long it'll take to build up new systems, new structures. Merging ministries takes long. So it's important to look what of the existing structures can be used and optimized before we start to build up things from scratch. You have to be informed intensively, and one takeaway from the Commission work was that many people see these challenges not with frustration but with enthusiasm, and involving them seems to be important, especially when we look at the young people. Maybe so far, in brief, my ideas to the thoughts addressed, which I could contribute, and I like to pass on the word to the other panelists. Carlos.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we had a very long list of frustrations, you know, all the things that don't work, and particularly from our colleague from Uganda, a very long list of frustrations. So I sympathize with you. The problem is that we can basically take from that list one aspect that would help us address all of them. We need structural transformation of the economies of these countries. And structural transformation comes with a certain number of parameters that are quite well known by the economists. The reason they are not happening is because in order for them to happen, you need a certain number of preconditions, some that are domestic, some that are provoked by systemic problems that we have in the world scene. One of them is access to capital. If you pay a premium risk that is the highest in the world, obviously you are going to have also the most difficult debt problem to address. Because if your colleague is paying 0% to buy his house and you are paying 11%, who do you think is going to have more problems to pay the house? And this is what we have. And the reason is because it says, well, it's because you have coups, you have governance issues and all that. All right, Thailand has 10 coups, but they get access to capital. So just treat me like Thailand. I'll be happy. Why is it that in Africa is always different? It's different because we have a narrative. The power of narratives is amazing. And this narrative has to change. And this is the most important contribution ODA can make. So it's not about changing the institutions, but it's about changing the institutional frameworks. It's not about creating another, commission or another ministry. No, it's about changing the mindset. And these institutional frameworks have been with us for too long, so I appreciate the legacy is heavy for us to confront, but we need to do it because, it's not Trump. Let's not be too distracted. It's the megatrends, demographics, climate, and technology that are going to basically impose it. And particularly the technological one is going to be the one that is going to be at the speed of light, and we are not going to be able to master it if we don't change the mindset. And that's what I think, basically should be our focus. Now, looking into ambitions, I want to respond to the question. It's not ambitions of values. It's ambitions of targets. I'm absolutely for the human rights declaration in full. But don't tell me that it's going to be done in 15 years. That's the problem. It's the targets. It's the way we deal with targets. Don't tell me we are going to be able to reduce the average temperature of the Earth by 1.5 degrees when every scientific evidence is going to tell you that is just not possible. Those who say it's possible is because they are basically creating the ambition that we have, transformed into mistrust. I'm going to say something that is not very polite to organizations that I've worked with for so long and have due respect for everybody that is engaged on them. But when you hear that on a particular crisis, this many children are without whatever, and this many have died, 1 week after it happened, tell me how these statistics are produced. How are they produced? It's a question that the skeptics are going to ask whether you like it or not. And that is going to create mistrust. Because it's not about the suffering itself. It's about the way we associate suffering with numbers, targets, and a certain number of parameters that are very easy to undermine with evidence. This is the problem. That creates mistrust. We have to have a different approach to this. I know why these figures are thrown immediately 1 week after. Is because we have been with so limited resources to deal with the crisis that this is seen as an advocacy tool to mobilize money. So we have transformed advocacy in a replacement of facts. Well, we do it for the good reasons. Others do it for fake news. But the method is the same. So let's focus on the method, change the method, change the narrative, because otherwise we are going to keep talking to the like-minded, the ones that agree with us. And we bend the reality to fit what we believe. But it's not going to make the problems go away. They will remain there and are going to create the space for the not like-minded to undermine what we want to achieve for the global commons. That's the problem. And I think, you know, I like to associate this with, my last word, to associate this with the idea that everybody has the right to pragmatism. The right to pragmatism. So when some things don't happen, let's say in Germany, it's just because we are in Germany. I'm not picking up on Germany. But let's say that, you know, this and this, you will hear people say, well, politically that is not possible. You know, our institutions would not allow this. This is not realistic because we have this and that position. The media will never buy that. You know, all of this is right to pragmatism. We are saying, you know, these things, you know, you have to be pragmatic, otherwise we are not going to advance. Just accept the right to pragmatism also exists over there, in the other side of the planet. They also have political processes and difficulties to move things forward. If we think that the right to pragmatism is just for some and not for the others, we have something that doesn't work.
So, Jochen Steinhilber.
Ja, danke.
Jochen Steinhilber, yes, right to pragmatism. I'll pick up on that because I'm completely with you here. I've said this in my first comment. I think we have to watch out that the goals and objective of global development corporations are formulated resistant to disappointment. So migration probably is the most toxic debate that we're having in Germany at the moment. If we don't move on in the discourse there, many other fields of politics will be paralyzed. And what do we see here? Well, on the other side, we don't see pragmatism. We see maximum positions. We see access where we say, okay, we got one way now and one thing, one type of policy, and that'll change everything. So I think we have to make very sure in the different field of policies, and that applies for development policies as well, that we take action, that we propose policies that work, that is affected, that doing the right thing and doing the right thing right. And with respect to refugees, of course, we have a focus on it, not just concerning labor and migration, but refugees in the first place. So we do that. So we look that we support the receiving communities where 80% of the refugees go, so that we don't have secondary conflicts there. What do we do as well? We support both the ones that are already in the countries, like the ones that are fleeing, so they don't have to take up that risky route. And the third point is the debate that politicians in development field say, and they have been saying for a long time, is the question, we have interests on one side, and do they oppose the values? And it's a theoretical debate, really, because in the end, in the concrete case, and here we're pragmatic as well, we have to work on the contradictions that we do see. It's not a shopping list. On neither side, by the ones that say we have 5 interests, and I'll go them through for every country, and also not on the side of the ones that say only the values count. Both won't work. Both is in the reasoning of development policies, interests and values. And we have to make it concrete in the different countries. What are the interests there? What is possible? And there's going to be fuzzy edges and contradictions. And we'll have to address that. That's down-to-earth politics. That has to be looked at, and you cannot get out of that debate. And at the same time, and that's something I wanted to say, of course, human rights are going to play a central role also in the future of development work. It's like you said, it's not there that you do it within a couple of years, but it is part of the value and that is central in it. And I'm not very sure, or I am very sure, it is not helpful if we look at what's the benefit for us. Not only, I've said so, but it's not horrible. It's we have to look at the German side of things. We won't get around that debate. And that debate also includes the question of solidarity. There's no doubt about this. And many of us are there in the civil societies there. But in the end, we need to look at what is in it for Germany. And I'm not just looking at raw materials. Also, we have to see that we provide global goods, and that's in the interest of Germany as well. But for that, we have to find the arguments, and that's central. Because if we don't do so, and I repeat myself, from my point of view, development cooperation had started because you could take it out, you just take it from the transparency portal of the federal government, put something out and ridiculate it, and that's it. It's not going to be there. For decades, German policy was a project of the elites. Nobody cared for it. It was friendly disrespect or friendly disinterest. You do it. But that has changed. Now it is in the center of the German debate, and we will have to address that. We have a critical public opinion, which is not as good as informed as it could be, but then we have to make sure with this kind of event and many other things that we get into the dialogue here. And that is pivot. And the last point about concerning odor, quite right. I think it was never good to do one-size-fits-all in development policies, and it won't be good in the future. It'll be worse. We're going to have countries that differentiate. We have a more differentiated landscape of countries in different situations, let me call it that. So we're going to think what countries can we use to provide global goods. We're going to have crisis countries that need money, where we have to go in together and say, you need money quickly, otherwise people will die of hunger. So that's it. And I think it's quite right. Order is thought too small. And for years, we have been aware that 0.7, that we all had this in the coalition contract. Now we don't. For the first time, it had a symbolic value. But it is something that you could drive home. It's out. I regret that, but I am aware that it has to go beyond. And this is why I think it's an opportunity now to think about it. And also, I think in German development cooperation, we have to think more in terms of financial cooperation as well, because I think there are many countries that don't get out of the realm, but they get stronger or more interesting, or find more interesting what the financial cooperation is concerned. And the last point, we've got so many partnership models. I think it's a good point. I'm not a friend of partnership models. I think the question of partnership and how can we get the countries of this world in categories helps us. Saying that in all this jungle, we get some structure, and in the end, it is having clear objectives. What do we want to deliver, and with whom? With which countries, and with which UN agencies, with which civil societies. And this is the central point. We have to make clear what do we want. And then you said this, And that's the point I want to make here, or I'm going to fight for in the next years. I do think Germany has to come up with more ideas, change the U.S. agencies, but use them as well for certain things, for ideas, maybe like the Canadians did in the past, possibly looking at how to create alliances and how can we move things forwards. Hola, there would be much more, but I'll leave it at that for the time being.
María Fernanda.
Excellent, excellent. Well, perhaps a few quick thoughts. I think we are late. One is coming back to trust. And I think it's not only trust among countries, it is trust among citizens and trust in the institutions that we have built and represent us. And that leads me to the issue is building new. And I really understood what Carlos tried to convey. It's not just, closing the door of the World Bank and throwing the key and say, well, let's organize again. I don't think that we can afford doing that. But it means, I think, and with, following multilateral institutions for more than 30 years, I see that there is a multi-scale, multi-timing effort that needs to go into reform. So the painkillers and the Botox approach and the Band-Aid approach, the incremental approach is needed at some point. But also the long-term, the structural is also needed. But they both have to happen at the same time. That's the thing. So you have to move into sequences at the same time. The ambitious, the long-term, and the immediate response capacity. And here I'm going back to the issue of the humanitarian deployment, going back to the UN, for example. I saw this study of BP Global that works on global health. And here I don't think that they're making up numbers, but they say that with the withdrawal of USAID, there are 14 million people that are going to basically die because of lack of access to vaccines, treatment, basically on non-communicable diseases and others. So I think that we have to look at that and see how well the system was prepared. The resilience, the scenario building, the preventive part. And I think that's one issue that we seriously need to address. How to be prepared, how to be resilient for any changes that might happen to the system. And now we are in a situation of filling the gaps. And that's where we need the friendly countries to fill the gaps. And we see one country that is doing a serious analysis on how to fill the gaps. And the country is called China. And they're very serious about seeing, where is that they can put their resources and the support to keep the system operating. So I would say it's a multiple timing, multiple depths and Band-Aid painkiller approach, but also the structural approach to change. Going back to trust, I said among countries, citizens with institutions. But here again, something we haven't discussed is the issue of the performance of our democracies. And this is also a very, very complex issue. Many people, and look at Latino Barometer in my part of the world, 8 out of 10 Latin Americans do not trust political parties. We are in big trouble because that's the fertile ground for ultra-nationalism, for extremism in all sorts and forms. So we really need to reassess the performance capacity of our political systems in our democracies. I want to say a few words about targets being overambitious. And here, perhaps, one of the very few times that I disagree with my friend Carlos, because, targets are aspirational. And also informed by science many times. I was in Paris when the Paris Agreement was adopted. And the issue 10 years ago, that was, and the discussion is how to phrase. We had the scientific information in our hands that we could not go beyond 1.5. And we agreed, because if you look at what is writing, it's below 2 degrees. It doesn't say 1. It says below 2 degrees or something. No, because we had the panel on climate telling us that is the limit. We also have the information of the Potsdam Institute about planetary boundaries telling us we have trespassed 4 of the 9 planetary boundaries. We are in deep trouble. So when we define the targets, some, not all, but many of the targets are science-based. So if we don't trust science, then again, we are in deep trouble. And when we come up with the numbers, for example, the 1.5 trillion for climate, I don't think that these numbers were made up. Someone sat and say, let's say something that looks important so we can bargain. I don't think that was the case. There were many studies that converged. Some say some would say 1.5 trillion, others said 1 trillion, etc. But it's a matter of looking at the maths and how the arithmetics were done. And then the agreement in Baku, you and I were there, was the 300 billion. And now we expect that Belém is going, to pull up the amounts. And these are not issues of arithmetics and of overambitious targets. I think when you say we need to eradicate poverty, for God's sake, it's a moral imperative. It's not an overambitious target. We need to eradicate poverty. Extreme poverty is growing more than ever. We have a moral responsibility as a humanity. This is more than a target. This is a foundational issue for humankind. It's a survival issue. The same when we put targets on the planetary boundaries and how much we can harm our environment. So I would say, yes, they are aspirational. Yes, there are difficulties. But when you look at the amounts in remittances, the amounts in global savings that I mentioned before, it is not a problem of scarcity. It is a problem of political choices. And our political choices have proven not to be the right ones in the world of today. And just to close is... Again, and I can say this with authority, I've never worked for the UN. I'm a UNer, never worked for the UN. But I can tell you one thing. There is something that we should go back to the drawing board is on prevention, on the preventing conflict, preventive diplomacy, preventing and being resilient to shocks, even financial shocks. And if we have a responsibility as humankind, is to fund, to provide the resources, so our global public good called the United Nations organizations can continue, to operate on these 2 timings, the shock response and also the long-term transformation mode. And here again, I see a very important role for Germany to play.
Vielen Dank. Vielen Dank allen.
Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone. To that introduction into the day. I think lots of what we have heard this morning will reflect in the deep dives in the afternoon, and maybe we'll address these things again in different ways. We are moving between the necessity to reset up global goods like the UN system, at the same time handle acute crises. We need pragmatism, but also a very clear objective of where we want to go, which can't be less than the problems that we have, which are big to be solved. So that ambition has to be high. Still, at the same time, in this country, we have an independent BMZ, but a declining budget. We don't know how far yet, but that's a reality, which it boils down to. So keeping up the objectives and get more effective in the way to go there. So avoiding double structures, organizations that pull different ends, although they could do something together. That is what I see the discussion on targets, which are not just the global common good, but that understand that on a local basis it has to work as well. And in that sense, their interests are not negative as long as they can be allocated to the framework of values. Thank you, and we'll finish the morning with some information on the lunch. Yes, we are a bit behind in time, but I think it was very interesting. We will take the lunch break now. Maybe we can have a slide on that. For lunch, we have the terrace with 2 stands where you can select Colombian and Japanese food. The Colombian stand will donate to flooded areas in Colombia. That's an initiative, and the price for the lunch is €8 to €9.50. You can only pay in cash. So if you need cash, you can walk over to the cash machine outside. We have a market of opportunities with lots of stands of different organizations. During the lunch break, this is where we have German Watch, PowerShift, Miserio, Mozambique, Vid Initiative, Perspective, FDCL, ASA, who have their stands here. We are very happy to have them here, take the opportunity to network, to discuss during the lunch break, as we have done so far. Yes, and at 2 o'clock, we will carry on with our deep dives. You see it on the screens. We have 4 deep dives. 1 to 3 was prepared by participants of the SLE postgraduate program. That's something that we want to give here. If you're interested, maybe do the forum next year. The application is open. Go to the website for more information. And deep dive number 4 was proposed by Heinrich-Böll-Stiftung. So 3 little points on these. Number 1, the space is a bit limited. So if you don't find a space in the one you'd love to go, come to the forum here. Deep dive number 4, and there we are going to have the online audience as well. The second in the deep dives, there's going to be a graphic recording, so the discussion will be visualized and live recorded. And what's going to happen to it is a little surprise. And the most important point now, please be on time in your rooms. 2 o'clock. All of the rooms are on this floor here, so you won't get lost. And then later in the afternoon, we will meet again here in the big audience. Enjoy the break and enjoy the lunch.